But in this case, good for you.
Yes. Yeah,
So,
that's
yeah,
right.
so good job on, what was it, the increased
Awareness?
Awareness.
The
Or
visible-
conservation.
Increased
Conservation.
So my
Yeah,
handwriting's
so I
awful. It's really
Yeah, and I mean, using your example, after the Olympics, Brazil is still going to be on lots of people's minds, and so just that has raised the awareness of Brazil, and so more tourism begets more tourism almost.
Yeah.
Okay, so this one is the easiest one to complete. You know, all kinds of pollution, air, water, land, you know, light pollution. Oh, you've got all that.
Yeah.
That's all.
Invasive
explain
species,
light
that's a
pollution?
really good one. What did you say, Jesse?
No, I was just saying we put all
Light
pollution at the
pollution?
bottom of
Yeah,
an
we can talk about
accident.
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, light pollution.
So like light pollution would be like, for example, if you go up a mountain in Boone at night and all the lights, street lights and stuff are still on, you can't see the stars, you can't see anything. Like, and that's a huge reason for tourism, especially in like a natural environment like this would be to go see, you know, the mountains in the natural environment. Like for example, out west, I lived there for a while. Anyway, in Denver, if you're in Denver, you can't see anything when you
Yeah.
look up, but you go 2 miles outside of Denver, their lights are gone,
Yeah.
you can see the Milky Way without a telescope, just look up.
And you're right, that actually is a niche of tourism, to go places where you can see the
stars.
skies.
Oh yeah. It's a lot of,
The night
there's a
sky.
lot of it out west.
Yeah, yeah.
Arizona's got a ton.
Canada, even though Canada doesn't count. Invasive species is a really good one. If you guys have ever traveled to an island, they're real sensitive about where you've been, and you know, and you should be too. I mean, anything could be stuck in the grooves of your shoes, and then it takes root, and next thing you know, kudzu has covered Hawaii.
Another, like it also goes with invasive diseases, because in England they don't have rabies at all, so if you want to bring your dog there, you have to have it in quarantine for like
Right.
2 years.
That's right. That's right.
So we left our dog in France because they don't have that.
That's right. That's right. And then of course all of
My
the
cousins live in France.
damage and erosion
Like, here, have my dog.
to both the land and water. Yeah. All right, so moving back this way, negative things about sociocultural. You know, when you mentioned the Cherokee Alley, it made me think of back in the 60s and 70s, when you went to go visit Cherokee, you would drive by the reservation entrance, and there would be an older man out there with a big headdress on. And he might have like a tomahawk or something. He was kind of going like this or whatever. And then if you went in the souvenir shops, the visitor merchandise shops, you could buy your own little rubber tomahawks and little snakes and stuff. Okay, what's wrong with that picture? And you would see the teepees, like you could see the teepees out.
Those aren't Eastern Indian
No,
tribe cultures.
they're not.
Tomahawks and teepees are Western.
Or in
Like the Cree
headdresses.
Nation,
Yeah.
that's all, you know, way
That's
of the
right.
plains.
That's right. So Cherokee was
I lived in West Virginia.
actually distorting its culture to portray to visitors, because I guess that's what they thought visitors expected, and so that's what they did. They distorted it, they commercialized it, and they prostituted it. I mean, they just warped it all around. That's one of the worst things that tourism can do to a place. And it all kind of starts with that tourist gaze. All right, so absolutely you can, and you can lose your tradition. You know, I think about the effects that we as Westerners have on other parts of the world with our baseball hats and our, you know, our style, whatever style we have. It can cause loss of tradition in more rural and remote areas. Our technology. Why is globalization in the bad, in the negative?
Well, it just depends on like how much culture wants to keep what is theirs, and like the Cherokee thing, and rather than keeping theirs, they just went with what the people wanted, so they just totally switched.
Yeah.
So as you can, you know, whenever it comes to business, you're gonna sell what sells.
Yeah.
So you can kind of get lost in touch with.
Yeah, so globalization can do that to a place. Yeah, and I think you're right. It just depends on how much. Yeah. Loss of privacy and unwanted exposure, absolutely. Gosh, we can all think of places that are too touristy, and real people don't live there anymore. It's just, people serving the tourists and the tourists themselves. Yeah, yeah. Travelers catching diseases cultivated in a foreign country, absolutely. So anything here that we missed that you guys have thought of since you were up here?
I think it's kind of ingrained in all of that, but just like losing sense of place of a community, and I guess.
Where did you learn that phrase?
Women.
Okay. I was like, Dana Clark doesn't use that word. Yeah, sense of place is really important.
We have to read
Okay.
all of these articles.
That's
but
right.
yeah, just sense of place, and like it can even happen to like small communities. Like he talked to us about like Durham lost their sense of place, for example. And we just don't.
But they're kind of getting it back too. They're kind of reinventing.
Yeah.
Pulling from the old. Yeah, sense of place. That's really, really, really an important phrase and concept in tourism and in communities, and more importantly in communities.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So, like North Korea, obviously Americans cannot travel there, most likely, right? Yeah. And so, like, what effect does that have on tourism?
In North Korea?
And like for any country that's wanting to like go to North Korea or something, or North Korea, I don't know. I was just thinking about that.
I'll just address this as a non-expert. Couple comments. North Korea's been on my to-go-to list for a long time. But the fact that U.S. is not welcome, and it's difficult for U.S. to get in, and South Koreans are in the same boat, doesn't mean the rest of the world can't go there if they don't want to. Like, there's a lot of Chinese travel there. They have these mass games every year where they welcome tourists. So the fact that we can't go there doesn't mean they're off limits. The same thing applies to Cuba, where Dr. Klein, if I may, I'm trying to embarrass everyone, sneaks in there illegally periodically, even though they're not allowed to go there. The fact that Americans aren't allowed in Cuba, Cuba still does a significant amount of tourism with Canadians, who I guess are the same as Americans. I'm not exactly sure how that works if it's not international.
Right,
But,
that's right.
but you get Russians and you get Europeans and so forth there. So the fact that we're not included maybe cuts down a little bit on the percentage of tourists that arrive, but it's countries that we are closed off from, or that are closed off to us, are still open to many cases about the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Another question. Where would traffic fall under, like, environment?
Traffic would find environment and sociocultural, and it could fall under economic, depending on what the ramifications are.
It's all
Yeah. And that's one of the neat things about this is like, some things can be in all three, and then some things can be positive and negative, depending on your perspective.
I was gonna say another one that can go under sociocultural is increased awareness of like inadequacies in your own culture.
Yeah.
Like when I was in France, and the first thing I noticed was there were a lot more biracial couples, that especially in the South, like North Carolina where I was. I was like, what the hell? Like they're fine with it. What's wrong with me? And like what's wrong with our culture?
And that's you, the traveler. That's an
that
impact
was,
on you, not
but
on
you
the
can,
community.
and like the same thing can happen if someone shows up like in like a heavily Muslim country, like a woman shows up who's very independent.
Yes.
The women there might take notice and realize, wow, I could be this.
Yes. Yeah, for
So
sure.
it can go both ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of that awareness and then how you feel about those observations is another thing. But yeah, having people come into your country that look different, dress different, act different, believe differently, all of that is just a big, big deal for the community. Yeah. And that reminded me of something else we'll talk about another day. But, sorry. Okay, so we're here, right? Okay, so the cruise industry causes destination to lose bed taxes. That looks like Allie's writing. Is that Allie's writing? Okay, what is that? What are you talking about there?
Well, we talked
First of all, I'm
about
proud of you, because we talked about this in class the other day.
So, because we talked a lot about cruises, but like when cruises go into port, people get off the boat and they spend their money on jewelry or souvenirs or, a tour, but then they get back on the boat and they don't stay at the destination, so they're not filling a bed, they're not getting the bed tax or the occupancy tax to go to the DMO.
So would that be why, like, I remembered I did go to Mexico.
Mhm.
They charged us to go to the bathroom, like use the public bathroom. So are they doing that to compensate for what they're losing on the bed taxes?
Probably not directly, no, probably not to compensate specifically for that. And there are just cultural differences about free toilets, free public toilets versus not.
You have to pay for them in France. There's no such thing as a public toilet.
I didn't know if it was just right there on at the port and different, because I was just a little.
Yeah,
In
no, I mean,
Cancun, you don't have to pay for a public toilet.
hmm?
In Cancun, you don't have to pay for a public toilet.
Yeah, that's where I
It's
was.
just different places. Yeah. And that's, that's one of the things, like, if you're behind the scenes and you're part of the planning and the management, then you get to decide on that, should we do this? Should we charge for it? Is it going to upset people? Is it going to upset people for a quarter? Maybe not. But there are some very cultural differences where just because we're not used to that doesn't mean it doesn't happen in lots of other places. But I don't think it's directly because to offset the bed tax. Yes, ma'am.
That's like, the last guest speaker, Ryan Smith, she talked about how Raleigh has a 1% prepared food and beverage tax.
Mm-hmm.
And not everyone's talked about that, so like, I don't know if every city has it or if it's just certain
No.
cities, but I thought that was interesting.
It's certain cities. In addition to the occupancy tax that Chelsea was talking about, sometimes cities in the U.S. have a prepared food tax. So it's not on produce, but if you go to a restaurant or even if you go to the grocery store and you go to the prepared food section, you're going to be charged an extra 1% tax. And then that helps go back to something in the community, depending on how the community decides. Make sense? Okay. So a lot of times people in the community fight those taxes. They absolutely fight those taxes tooth and nail. People in the community fight it, even though they're not paying for it. Why would they do that?
Scared visitors wouldn't want to pay it.
That's exactly why. That's exactly why. But from what we typically know, visitors don't really notice. They don't really notice another 1%. Or if your county is charging a 2% bed tax and your county is charging a 2.5% bed tax, they're not going to make a decision which county they're going to stay in. But that's the perspective of the business people. They want any economic advantage to bring people into their business. And so sometimes they oppose those taxes, even though they don't have to pay them, and it goes directly to help the community.
And sometimes once they're like in the occupancy tax fund, people try to get them to move to the general fund so that they can move some too.
That's right.
So they'll fight for them once they get them too.
That's right. They really do fight for them. Okay. Who wrote this?
That was me.
Okay. What do you mean here?
So like in tourist locations, if people come to work seasonal jobs, then the locals are pushed out of the opportunity to work a job.
Okay. And the fact that work is sometimes seasonal in the tourism industry can be a bad thing, because what are you going to do on the off season? However, that can also go up here sometimes, because if you are working very, 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 very hard during summer season, well, maybe you have planned and you save up so much money that you live off of it in the winter season, and you and your family do something together. You have some tradition. The seasonality issue is also, can go here. If it's seasonal, it gives the natural resources time to regenerate and recuperate. Yeah. So one of the criticisms of the hospitality and tourism industry is that not all of the wages are high, and that's absolutely true. But they're not all low either. So you can make a pretty good living in the tourism industry depending on where you're working, and like anything else, you work hard and move up. One thing that applies to the United States that I don't see here, I don't know if it would necessarily where it would apply, but property, the sale of property, how the cost of living goes up in touristy places. Okay, so that's a really good thing if you're a business person selling stuff to tourists, because you're making a lot of money. But it's a bad thing if you're a resident in the community and there's nowhere else to buy your goods. Okay. Same thing with property tax. If you want to buy property in Key West, then forget it. Just forget it. You can't afford it. But if you're on the market to sell some property in Key West, you're going to do fine. So some things not only go this way, but can both be positive and negative.
I went to Key West for spring break and gas was over $4 a gallon,
Oh, yeah.
and here it's
I'm
like $2.
not a Key West fan.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It is beautiful, but nobody lives there.
Yeah, everybody lives in Key Largo and Marathon and further north.
But it is beautiful. It's a good place to visit. All right, you guys did an amazing job. And this type of thing, this is stuff you can start putting into your journal.
Can I take a picture?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You want me?
You can buy me a fun.
I was so polite. May I take a picture before just taking?
I think we should take a little break, and when we come back, we'll watch the film.